Cheryl is proud of the strong partnerships she has maintained across sectors and believes that ending poverty requires a diversity of voices to ensure better systems and communities for all of us. And most recently was nominated to the National Council for the Eradication of Poverty. Is that the name? Poverty reduction. Great. So welcome, Cheryl. Thank you for being here. Okay. So our first question that I made up is for Cheryl. So Cheryl, what does reconciliation mean to you in the context of community housing or affordable housing?
So I thought about that over the last few days. It means so many things, and it's so multi-layered, and it's like one big tangled ball of yarn that we're all in together. And I think the parts that are hard are the parts of the yarn that are knotted. And the sense making we need to do is to sort of take a step back and find out where the beginning is and start threading our way through. Around community housing, like I talked about in my acknowledgement, our family had such a good experience when they settled here. We got help when we needed help. When we went to a window, we didn't expect to hear no. We went there with the ask that we had or the need that we had, and we got that need fulfilled without judgment, without prejudice, without all of these things that I think a lot of people are experiencing today. I mean, I think we have a system right now that tries to catch cheaters, tries to catch people who are taking advantage of the system. And while there are always going to be those people, most of them aren't those people. Most of them are people like my family who really just need a hand to get through those things. And they don't want to stay there. They want to be self-sustaining. They want to thrive. They want to succeed. They want to thrive. So around reconciliation, what I think it is when you were introducing me, one of the ways that Bantero works and how we see ourselves helping people live in two worlds is on our site, we're incorporating culture into everything we do. Ceremony, culture, teachings, all of those things. We're helping people rediscover or reconnect or connect for the first time with who they are as an Indigenous person. But outside of our walls, what we're doing is we're partnering with organizations, institutions, levels of governments, like all kinds of people. We're partnering with them because they too are serving the community that we serve. And we want them to serve them in a good way. We want them to come to that window like I did, like my parents did, and be served in a good way when they get there. And we see ourselves sort of getting to that place by working in partnership with those institutions, government services, all of those things. And where we've come in the last 25 years, it's almost 25 years that I've been there, is coming to a place, and I think the TRC helped us get there because it put truth and reconciliation on the minds and hearts of people, is a willingness to consider a different way of working, and a willingness to look at changing the way we engage with the folks that we're serving. So in community housing, we work with people who we don't just take rent. We don't just help people make rent, because housing isn't just about making the rent, right? Housing is about having a place that is going to take care of your family, that's going to shelter your family, that's going to be a sanctuary for your family, and it needs to look a certain way, it needs to function in a certain way. And I think because of resources, our families are often in places where that's what they can afford, and so they sort of get what they get. And we as a system, I think, need to offer families a place that is going to make them feel good, so that when they get out there, they continue thriving in that way, whether that be at school, whether that be at work or whatever. And in our housing programs, what we're doing is we're connecting with people out there who are also serving our families. We're helping the people that we serve in our housing programs see the world in a different way. Something as simple as in our apartment building, I always tell this story because I just think it's so powerful. Our resident manager there doesn't just take the rents. She helps the people in the building. She knows the people in the building. She understands what's going on with all of the tenants that are in the building. And we had a young mom who was down the hall from the manager. And one day she was coming home. The manager was coming home and she saw this tenant, said hello, and the tenant was really upset and was on the verge of tears. And, you know, another manager might have just kept on walking and thought, geez, I hope they're okay, and went on to their suite. But she stopped and said, are you okay? What's going on? And she had a piece of paper in her hand, and she was really upset by this piece of paper because it came from her child's school. And she said, they're blaming me for this, and it's not us, but they're blaming me for it, and, you know, I don't know what to do about this. And it was a letter from the school that said they had a problem with lice. And so it went on, and the eyes that the mom read the letter from were, it's your child who's spreading this lice. It's your child's fault. You're doing something wrong at home. That's the lens she read the words from. The words on the letter didn't say that at all. The words on the letter said, we have a problem at school. We need all of you parents to help us deal with this problem. Please tell your child to do this. And when they get home, you guys have probably gotten those letters if you have children. But when you come and see the world from those eyes, that's the way you read things. That's the way you understand the world around you. And so what our manager did was say to this mom, come to my place. I have something I want to show you. And she was just down the hall. So she went running into her place and ripped this letter off her fridge, and her children went to the same school. And she said, I got the same letter. And it doesn't say that at all. It says, don't let your kids share hats, you know, do this, don't do this. And when you're at home, it doesn't say what you think it says at all. It says this. So something as simple as that interaction in the hallway changed the way this mom looked at her school. She saw the school as a place that is there to help her child succeed, not as a place that is blaming her, that is painting her in a certain light and all of those things. And all it took was a conversation in the hall. A little conversation in the hall changed the way this woman looked at her child's school. And that's just her child's school. That could be the library, that could be a city worker, that could be anything. But that one little intervention, and I just think that's the power of community housing, is that it can't be just about, well, we have to give them nice places to live where they're going to feel good. We can't just be able to take rents, and we collectively have to take some responsibility for the people that are living in them. So that's the way I see it.
Sure. Yeah. So Sarah, why?
So before I answer that, I just wanted to say that I'm actually from Ontario as well, but I moved around growing up, and we have a family cottage at Hope Bay, which is really close to Minnesota. And we said that I'm just thinking about home right now and this connectivity to a piece of land that we share from your family, and I'm very thankful for having that family cottage that my father still owns. And there's this connection here, and I think reconciliation is about for housing is absolutely critical, and it's actually a good model to really look at community housing principle in general. We know for Indigenous people there's an overrepresentation of need for community housing, and unfortunately actually don't really have any data. So at Calgary Housing Company, the way that the government regulations work is housing need is based purely on how you would qualify for based on income and family size and bedroom types. And so I actually don't even have any data at this point, and we're working with other organizations to even understand the baseline of what's happening in terms of what Indigenous people do. Assumption is not well, but unfortunately we don't even know what's going on because we don't have any information. I guess the good thing is that people are assigned housing type based off of non-discriminatory means in terms of not knowing about people's backgrounds, but it causes significant problems in actually having success in housing. And so I think in general, we know that we don't have appropriate building forms, we don't have areas for cultural ceremony, we don't have opportunities for multi-generational living. We don't have opportunity for communal gatherings, and also it's very punitive. And so at Calgary Housing Company, we're very excited because it's scary because funding is ending, and social housing funding for the city of Calgary has 1,000 units, and the funding ends between 2021 and 2024. The opportunity is that we can recreate the entire system, and our focus is, I have a whole team working on transformation right now with a focus on sustainability and a resilient housing system. And our goal is to try to figure out how to create a nonprofit model where when people come in the door, are they better off than when they join Calgary Housing, and when they leave, are they better off? And that's a very different model than a community regulatory model where right now the asset is trumps everything, and that the unit, so if a person qualifies, you can live there, and as soon as they don't qualify, you're evicted. And so housing is about human beings and helping human beings thrive. And I think the reconciliation model is absolutely phenomenal for completely restructuring for Indigenous people. And it's also a way to learn in terms of how to provide housing better. And so so we're really in the early stages and really just trying to learn and understand. And part of like trying to be able to unwrap that and not having data and not even understanding the baseline means we have a long journey ahead.
Great, thanks. So I'll ask this question, and then Cheryl or Sarah, if either of you are interested in answering it, you can, or we can also just move on to the next question. But what have you seen, and Cheryl, you sort of talked about this a little bit, I think, but what have you seen happening in housing that you would say are steps towards reconciliation?
I'm not sure. I mean, maybe you know more about this than I do, but I just think of the people that are in those units, and some of them work for us, you know. Some of them are professionals who actually work in our organization, and when you work in the nonprofit sector, you're not in it for the money. You're in it to help people, and so we've had people in our organization who are living in those housing units, and it's like you were saying, it's like a black and white line where you qualified up to this point, and so they're telling me, don't give me a raise, because if you do, then I won't qualify for this anymore. And yeah, so like, and they work for us. So these aren't layabouts. They're people who are working out there and trying to make a life for themselves. And so those are the ones that come to my mind. And I think I talked about it in my blog a bit, where the line needs to be sort of white, gray, and then black, you know, and we need to have that period of gray where people are doing well and they're not excluded from getting this help because they've suddenly crossed an arbitrary line. And we need to have those areas of gray because people want to thrive, but if thriving means that they have to all of a sudden pay, 30-40% more in rent every month, it's going to put them back in that place again very quickly, right? So that's the kind of stuff I think about. But we're talking about it, right? We're talking about it and we're acknowledging it. And I don't think it's just organizations like ours that are acknowledging it now. I think as a system, we're starting to acknowledge that. The other thing, and I compare this to our settler spirit here in Alberta, like we've had people who came out here and made a life a long time ago, and they lived in these farmhouses and they had like 12, 13, 14, 15 kids. I'm pretty sure whatever model, the formula we have now that says you need this much space for this many kids, this gender and that gender, we didn't have that formula back then. We did just fine, and we're not having that many kids anymore, thank goodness. But it still stops people from getting in the house that is going to mean something for them. You talked about multi-generational living. My sister lives with my dad, or my dad lives with my sister, I should say, because she takes care of him, and he takes care of them in the ways that he still can. So this is something that's really normal in our communities, is to have that connection with, with our parents and grandparents. So, I visited my cousin in Sault Ste. Marie one time because I went that way for work in Ontario, and she has 4 kids, and she lives in a 2-bedroom apartment. And one bedroom was hers, and the other bedroom was her 4 kids. And I remember sitting in the living room going, how do they do this? And so when I went to the bathroom, I sort of peeked in that other bedroom. 2 sets of bunk beds. That's how they did it.
Yeah.
Bunk beds over here and bunk beds over here, and everybody was fine. And I don't know, were they doing something they shouldn't have been doing in Sault Ste. Marie, or I don't know, but they were just making it work, right? And they were fine. I mean,
Yeah,
I
we
might
certainly
not
like to take up a lot of space in Canada.
Yeah.
And our family rules are based off of a male and a female, husband and wife, and 2 kids. And the overcrowding rules, I think at some point, Canadians are gonna ask to look at that. I worry a little bit about overcrowding, what happened in the London Tower when you start eliminating it for safety, fire code, evacuations and things like that, but people live in a different way. And many Canadians, and there's this really traditional model of the family that the housing is actually constructed after. And then people try to work around it, living in those structures that don't meet their needs. And they don't have the pride, and aren't able to live the way that they would like to live. And I think that's a really foundational element of some of the challenges ahead.
That doesn't sound very cool.
But there's hope.
Yeah.
So I think in Alberta, we're at the beginning. My experiences, I really think in Alberta, we have a long way to go. I enjoy participating in BC and learning about the journey in BC in terms of providing a new government structure for Indigenous housing to be done by Indigenous people. I think we need that in Alberta, would be a good beginning. I think one of the things in Calgary that we've been successful in, when I started in 2001 in Calgary, the federal government was finally, for the first time, we were so excited, providing money for housing. And we did a survey of nonprofits to see would they be able to uptake the money to get the money to Calgary to build new affordable housing. And they couldn't, because of course they hadn't been developing for 20 years. They didn't have boards that would take risks, they didn't have development capacity, they didn't have land, construction expertise, it just wasn't in their model. 20 years later, we've had the plan to end homelessness, we had a Resolve campaign, fundraising for $120 million in the development industry, providing support for that, and we actually have a pipeline of housing. And so the city of Calgary has supported 2,300 units since 2016 of new affordable housing. And so our goal is to scale up nonprofits and get them to a size that they could have economies of scale. So 1,000 units to plus units, so that when you just have one building, it's harder to operate. But in the Indigenous housing, we don't have it. We actually have to work. There's very few units, and the units that are there are old, and there isn't a lot of capital or equity to build from. And so I think government can go and put all kinds of funding out there, but if you don't have capacity, you can't spend it in a way that will help with reconciliation, being able to build up the capacity of Indigenous groups to be able to deliver housing. And so I think it starts with that framework in Alberta in terms of not having even a provincial-wide transition of housing, to have more governance of Indigenous housing at a very high level, and then right down to the community level with groups that are providing housing, and they're really just trying to keep the doors open because of the underfunding and the expired agreements. They don't have the organizational capacity to build. And so I think that there's some exciting lessons from other jurisdictions that we can learn from. And really what we're trying to do is just understand how to move forward. The city of Calgary is having a lot of budget reductions. I think I still have a new position starting in 2020 to specifically be focused on Indigenous affordable housing. And the goal of that position is to understand and learn and help figure out how we can contribute to supporting solving this problem. And it really is probably gonna be on the capacity building as a whole. Hopefully we can get some units built, but I think we're a long way from that in terms of having a system. And so, we might be able to build off some of those nonprofits that are expanding, but that's probably not the right way to do it well for a long, long time into the future.
I just wanna add, that, just when we were having coffee here this morning at our table, we were talking about, I was sharing that story about how our settling here was so good. And, we were sort of wondering, was that just like a moment in time, or were we meeting the right, like, what was happening for our family that we had that experience? And I think it's probably a bunch of things. It might have been a moment in time, might have been the right person at the wicket. Sometimes I even wonder if my last name had something to do with it, because I wasn't born a Whiskey Jack. I was born a Capone, so that's my family name, and maybe they thought Italians would come to their help. It's worth considering. Like, it's happened for my sister who kept her name. When she showed up at her job sites, people were like, "Oh, I thought you might be Italian," and she's like, "Is that a problem?" So I think there's something there too. But the other thing I was gonna say is we do have something really neat, especially in this city, I think, going on. I was talking to my C5 colleagues last Christmas and talking about how I love Christmas. And the reason I love Christmas is that the month leading up to Christmas, we become so altruistic here in Edmonton. We're dropping off 50 winter coats at Boyle Street Co-op. We're dropping off 500 mittens because we did a mitten drive at our companies for the folks who Boyle Street serves. Whatever is going on, we have that spirit here where we come together. And then New Year's comes and we all go back to doing things the way we do things. But for December, think about it. Watch the news, because that's what they put on the news every day, is we're helping each other, and we're doing it with a smile on our face. We're doing it without judgment. And I just wish we could hang on to that feeling, like 12 months out of the year. But for that 1 month, I really enjoy it. So to me, that is reconciliation. That is doing it without expecting anything in return. That is doing it because it's the right thing to do. Doing it because there's a need that needs to be met. So
Alberta is so philanthropic.
it is.
And I think that's a real asset.
Yes, absolutely.
Trying to think if I should be selfish and ask another question, or if I should open it up. Maybe I'll ask one more question, be selfish, and then we'll open it up, because I think this question kind of draws on some of what both of you are saying. But what would you like to see happen in housing in terms of reconciliation? So Sarah, you gave us some sort of concrete steps, but maybe also like blue sky, like what if funding wasn't an issue, what would you like to see? We're skipping the barriers, just so you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that we're starting is some early research. So 2 partnerships the city is involved with is the Aboriginal Standing Committee on Housing and Homelessness has a research project, the CMHC, actually looking at cultural perspectives to inform housing system. I think we need to go slow. I think we need to really understand we could go fast, but I think that we might make more mistakes over and over again. And so that research, as well as we have another research project that we're participating in to look at those 2 worlds you're talking about. So it's specifically with Treaty 7 and looking at the system of care and what's happening between people moving from one jurisdiction to the other. And I think the more informed we are, the better solutions that we'll have. And so I know that might not be as sexy as something, like the ability to just go and build, but I do think creating understanding is really important. I was really nervous to be speaking on this topic. I consider myself an expert in community housing, but I have fear that speaking of a topic that of Indigenous reconciliation is so important, and making a mistake, saying something I'm ignorant to, I think that's where I'm at, and I think that's where maybe the conversation starts, because I don't even know how to help and who to engage and partner with in order to improve. And so I think to me that's important, and that's sort of like a vulnerability for that. It's a big change, and I think we're talking system changes for housing in general, and then with Indigenous housing, it's deconstructing, like you said, that's yarn. I just think of it as like you take everything away and you figure out how to build it properly. It's big.
In our work too, we do a lot of work with children's services, because a lot of our families are disproportionately involved in that system as well. And we didn't come up with it, it's ancient. It's an old model, it's our traditional model of care, and that's the practice model that we use at our organization. And I think the other folly in our thinking is that we need to create a strategy for them, which is us, right? For the other, which is us. But it's really a strategy that's gonna make sense for everybody. And we serve everybody at Ventura. We serve 75% of our folks that we're serving in that program are Indigenous, 25 are other, right? And it works for everybody. So, so to say we need to create a system for Indigenous people, it's really a system we need to create for everybody.
It's about having dignity in home and empowerment for people to be their most best self, and the opportunity to be able to make your own choices. So I totally agree in terms of it's a wonderful starting point, and it applies to everyone that we're serving in housing.
Yeah. And that reluctance you speak of it's like the Canadian condition.
It
So you're not alone in it. But the other thing I'll say about our practice model at Ventura is, I think it's 67% of our staff are not Indigenous. So there's more not Indigenous people working at Ventura than there are Indigenous people. We have an Indigenous practice model. 25% of the people we're serving aren't Indigenous. Like, so it's possible, right? We're asking our folks that aren't Indigenous to work in this way, and they are. And so it's possible.
Great, thank you. So we still have some time for our panelists, so I thought I would give time if folks have questions that they would like to pose in the context of our day for Cheryl and Sarah.
We talk a little bit about these, what's being perceived as these very black lines in the legislation we have to work with it. The one that was raised relating to bedroom size and size of families. One of the things that we've done in the Leduc region is giving people choice. We know the rules there. We know that we can't require people to have more children in a smaller space. But if a family chooses to live that way, we allow that. And we do not believe that we are in contravention of anything. It has been successful. And it's allowed families to make choices, get a roof over their head faster than they would have otherwise. How do we as an industry work within and with these rules, regulations, but make them work for us, make them work for the people we're serving? And I think sometimes we don't take those extra steps that we could.
It's about creating choice. How can you be, you're gonna be homeless because there's no 400 homes available? It's a weird system that doesn't make any sense.
I mean, our moms will say, I'll sleep on the couch.
Yeah.
Or my young daughter can room with me and I'll put the boys in, like whatever that thing is, because you're right, the settling, we all grew up to something quite different.
And they do it like in the big cities, like in Europe, they
Absolutely.
like that's how it is.
Absolutely,
They're in tiny, tiny little places, and big cities like New York, they're in tiny little apartments.
absolutely.
Maybe the tiny home movement will
Maybe.
push the limit a bit, because, people are putting families of four in the summer, but.
I think, Sarah touched on it though, that it's built for a certain kind of family that really hardly exists anymore. So that's the way the system was built, and I think that's, we need to deconstruct that lens and build it up to something that is truly more workable.
But I guess my point is, we don't need to wait for the system to change. We can work within the system the way it is right now and make changes.
There's also ability to recreate it. What we're working on at Calgary Housing is, we have a mixed model, one mixed model kind of developed, model of housing, there's 400 units. And it doesn't fall under regulation. You have to meet income limits, there's a lot of flexibility. And so this concept is very hard to implement. So this is gonna take a long time, but we do it in pieces. But the concept of a unit is a unit is a unit is a unit. If you're a rental, market renter, or if you're in lease subsidized housing, it's the same amenities, it's the same unit. The program goes with the individual. And so in this mixed market, which we're looking to transition the thousands, social units to, is that individuals, if their financial circumstances change, have the opportunity to be in the program. And so we see this a lot, and I don't have the best data around it because you can't calculate something that people make choices to avoid a program, is that you see people approaching that income limit and they cut back their hours. It's because the opportunity is you're gonna not have a home anymore and you're gonna have to spend 3 times more money on a private sector house. There's no way. So the system is keeping people in poverty or making horrible choices that an 18-year-old supposed to live on their own and their income is not calculated. They don't have the ability to save for education or to build their future, and now they're my next client. And mom, they have to make a decision. Am I gonna lie about them living here? Am I gonna force my kid to move out? Am I gonna move out, but I'm always probably gonna be at this income category and lose my home? Those are the choices that people in community housing make every day. And no system's perfect, and the demand is so many times more than the system. So trying to decide who gets housing is a difficult role, and I'm glad I didn't have to write that legislation because you're choosing one human being over another. I think it's hard, and at some point they have to have qualifications, but being able to flow up and down, having the ability that, okay, well, you actually aren't in this program anymore because you're doing really well, but you can revert back. Because there's a lot of fear that, like, what if I in 6 months have a problem with my job, or something happens in the family and I have income? How do we have it so that you can flow more easily? And that's what we're piloting now in certain portfolios to see, with good data and research, that we're really focused on that goal, our individuals better off. And choice comes into it. So not having to move because right now you have to move, and a lot of the times we don't even have another building in the same school district. So not only are you kind of deciding that you have a different program, but you're actually having to completely destabilize your entire family. And so those are the kinds of considerations that we have as we're trying to map out this model. And we know we're going to make mistakes and it's not going to be perfect, but trying to have this progressive approach. At Calgary Housing, I think a lot of people have missed too, is similar to what you've spoken about, is the average time moving in Calgary Housing is 4.5 years. And the majority of people move into private sector housing. And so I think there's this myth about who's living in community housing. Our focus is on where we do have negative exits, and well, who do we partner with to eliminate those, and what are the root causes of the negative exits? So there's a lot of work to do, but I see a lot of opportunity of that changing shift from not having the asset be the focus. We're in a people business. We just happen to manage buildings, which are homes, not just houses. But how do we have the programs be more focused on the people and not the assets? But the assets really well maintained. Because that's kind of that slippery slope that you let people live in poor conditions. And so we're adamant at Calgary Housing Company. We will not let someone move in to a unit now, and this was a hard decision 3 years ago, if it doesn't meet Alberta health and safety standards. And people will say, oh, well, those standards are too high because cracks in countertops mean that people need to live in dignity. And so within that, how do you frame that, also knowing how big the need is? And so obviously, it wouldn't make sense to be homeless if you have a cracked countertop. How do we take a stand to make sure that there's a proper funding and that the housing is in a good condition today and in the future? And so that's kind of the journey that we're on, is being able to have good assets, quality assets, and then also programs that can allow people to achieve their goals.
That was a similar exercise we went through with our building, where we didn't want our tenant to have to take from food and clothing to cover shelter, and so we charged our tenants whatever they got for shelter is what we charged them. But then our buildings started to fall apart around us because we just couldn't keep up with the repairs. And we had to take a similar stand and say, like, we need a good, safe place that looks, and makes you feel good to live in it, for our tenants, and that meant we had to raise the rents. But, the system, adjusted as well
Right.
and supplemented so that that family didn't have to take from those areas, just to cover the rent.
Sometimes I think that we're helping
Yeah.
shelter allowance not go up.
Yeah.
Because we're making people live
Yeah.
in social housing and we're stacking these government programs from different areas. But we're really actually creating more poverty
Yeah.
because shelter allowance needs to be at
Yeah.
a rate that you can
It's
operate a
ridiculous.
unit. But
Yeah.
what happens is it comes as maintenance. And so that's a massive broad-based system dilemma. And of course you wanna have as many people as possible, and serving the most vulnerable. So it's a big trade-off, but how do you do it without enabling that compression of shelter allowance? Because it's just not possible. We have tenants that pay $120 a month rent. Obviously, you have to have quite a subsidy to operate a building to a standard that's appropriate. And so we got a lot of repair to do,
Yeah.
a lot of maintenance. We did 2,000 units last year. After taking a stand, the government of Alberta gave more funding. We have a lot of catch up, but we were able to repair 2,000 units in a year, which is a good start. We have a long way to go, but without changing the conversation, you're just creating slums inadvertently because you're trying to house people. But it's, in the big picture of sustainability, it's not working. And I think that's what we're all here today, is talk about sustainability and resiliency and how do you have those levers and trade-offs. Working within, but also pushing the dynamics of the political system so that it can be better.
Monique, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's kind of a thought and a question all together. I mean, Sarah, you talked a little bit about sort of moving into more of a nonprofit model than a government run model, I think. And Cheryl, you talked about, we think about it as us creating something for them, the other. And I wonder if there's like, I'm coming out of a cooperative sort of lens, and I think the research is really important, and to build that mutual understanding and understanding how culture, how history plays into the place and the people and how it makes sense to develop, right? And does sustainability include building the capacity of people to have self-determination over not just by providing housing, so it's a launching platform, but actually governance over that housing or community-run housing. In Toronto, I worked, my first social work practicum was in a place called Miigwech Place, and it was run by a cooperative organization called Homes First. And it had all sorts of challenges, but it was trying to house people who had lived on or close to the street. And, the tenants had their struggles, but they also had great strengths and a lot of rich gifts to bring to the community. So I just wonder if that's in the thinking of sort of transitioning to nonprofit. Is it just because sometimes nonprofits can be quite hierarchical and as top down as governments can be. So I'm just curious about your thoughts on, and in your blog post you were talking about co-creation and self-determination as aspects of reconciliation, and with Cheryl she was talking about making amends and restoring what was formerly, belonged to someone and then friendly relations. And so how does, maybe I'm jumping ahead because I know there's not enough, right, at this point, but I'm just curious about that.
Well, I don't think it's all or nothing. I think, the journey to get here was a long journey. So the journey to get out of here, it should also be a long journey. But as long as we're making steps, I don't think, I mean, for the people we're serving, it's not gonna be fast enough. But if we make really sustainable steps that we can keep the momentum going forward, I think that's the journey that we'll be on. And it needs to make sense. And like I talked about that tango ball yarn, one of the areas is around our understanding of this issue, our understanding. Everyone in this room and probably lots of people outside of this room about how we got here. If I asked everyone in this room how we got here, we'll get different stories from everybody. So we're all at different places in our understanding of this. And, you know, I watched that First Contact the last 3 nights on APTN, and there was like 6 people on there, and they all had a different understanding of this land and our relationship to Indigenous people and our history with Indigenous people. And they all just came from a different place. And so I think that's the other part of the puzzle, is helping us all get to that place of having some understanding. And then, you know, and doing that at the same time. So there's so many different fronts we could be doing this work on. I don't think government has all the answers. I don't think all the nonprofits have all the answers, but, you know, if we look at promising practice and we set some, I don't know, principles or some must-to-be's, that's how we, and it sounds really simple, because I think it is really simple. It's like really basic, you know, when you look at doing the right thing, we made it complex. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. It's harder for an organization that provides 10,000 homes, because for efficiency, there's things like, you know, maintenance division. It's kind of systematic, where you're a smaller organization and have more building. But we're on a long journey at Calgary Housing Company. We created a tenant advisory group. We have lived this experience as a requirement on the board. We had a tenant requirement on the board, but it didn't work out because under the Rental Tenancies Act, that tenant gets in a weird situation as a tenant because there's different obligations if they're a board member. So we now have 3 board members who have lived experience. We have a long journey. Ottawa Corporation Housing has got a really good model, but they were created in the 1960s that way. So they have tenant leaders. They make decisions on building maintenance and individual buildings. In an entire network, they have conferences with 500 leaders of different buildings across the city that they then work on education, training, empowerment, sharing. We have such amazing things happening in our communities, and how do you have people living in the community get to know each other across the city and share that best practice? And so we're kind of starting out from scratch compared to some organizations that it was built into the model, maybe a membership model, and it's a big focus for us. So the city has a program called the Home Program that's focusing more on the Rent Smart program, which provides education to people that live in rental housing in order to understand tenant rights. There's a real parent-child relationship that happens with the landlord, and it's hard to shift that to a community. And so we have some problems in Calgary Housing where we, for example, pest control. We have 2 buildings right now that have significant pest control problems. And it has to be a joint responsibility, because we could actually empty the building and empty all the contents of the building, which is, you can't really do that, and put it all back. But you can still have a pest control problem if people living there don't know how to prevent the pest control. But as a landlord, we often have tenants who say, you need to fix this is your problem. But we can't, because we're partners. And so that's just one example, but it's a long journey, I think, to move to a community model. And we're really looking at best practices, and I think it absolutely has to be part of what the nonprofit is about. It's about decision making, like, and at what level and what does that look like? Right now, our tenant advisory group kind of focuses a lot on, like, I've got this issue in my building, and to have real strength and power and a voice politically, we've got to get it to sort of a governance level too. And so that's another focus, is how do you have people have access during elections to get inside the buildings? So they can go door to door and knock and talk to tenants, and tenants can give their opinion and get, be part of the voting process, because there's a lot of barriers there. So, yeah, I think it has to be part of it, because that's part of building strong communities. We have, in the home program, we have also, we did the Calgary dollars, where you can share, barter, share, and then have Calgary dollars. We use those for rents. So we're trying to do different initiatives to support tenants, to share goods, build equity, participate with each other, and build a strong community. And the other piece is storytelling, is that my staff have the opportunity to be having stories every day, and they have trouble even like remembering to come up to put those stories together so that we can share them. Volunteerism in our communities is really, really high. And people that have significant challenges, even just physically getting up out of bed, maybe taking 2 to 3 hours with somebody helping them get themselves ready for the day, are doing food box programs, are volunteering with their neighbors in many activities. And I don't think that that's understood. And how do you celebrate and continue to build upon the tremendous amount of volunteering that's happening there? And so, yeah, I think we have a lot of way to go. And, as a housing provider, we can facilitate, but it's also just kind of facilitating it to happen. But then when you get into decision-making, there's a lot to think about there. As a $110 million company, there has to be people running that company or overseeing it or guiding it have to have an understanding of what that means, as opposed to a specific building issue. And so that's hard to find, and it takes a long time to build up that. It's hard to find board members in the city anyways, in terms of you just keep getting the same people. And we hear about boards being, mostly men and white and all this stuff. So it's a problem in our society. And we think about how do you have people participate in governance of very large organizations. It's a similar process, but more specific.
Great, okay. So I think we have to sadly end our panel there, so I'll ask you to join me in thanking Sarah and Cheryl for their time.